This training video is going to cover how to submit an international expense report. The first step is getting your request approved. Once that's approved, you've traveled and came back, we're going to focus on the expense side. So your expense report should look like this. The very first step for creating an international travel expense report is creating a travel allowance. You'll select travel allowance from the drop down here, manage travel allowance. What this is going to do is going to actually pull in the per diem amounts as regulated by the IRS. So it's very pivotal that you do this first. If you don't do this first, unfortunately in Concur, other options will error out, such as your lodging and your meals. So step one is always going to be to create a travel allowance. When you select it, it'll bring you into the second item here, available itineraries. You'll want to create a new itinerary. Now, this is just going to be the time that you left until the time that you arrived in your international country. So for instance, we're just going to do a hypothetical. If I leave San Diego, California, and I leave on (9/26/2022), and let's say I left at 9 in the morning. And then let's gonna say that I'm arriving in Paris, France. Again, these are not accurate, but I'm arriving in Paris, France the next day at 8 a.m. This is considered the first leg of my trip. Now, we don't need to have multiple stops. Let's say you had, a layover in Dallas or something to that effect. We don't need to see all the stops. What's really important is the time that you left the airport and the time that you first arrived in the country where you're going to be spending the bulk of your time. So again, we don't need to see the layovers, just kind of your starting point and your ending point. And you will save that. And now it's going to ask for when you come back. So if you're just doing a trip where you go to international and you are only staying in one particular city, in one particular country, you'll just do one stop. If you have business purposes in multiple cities and countries, you want to add in those stops because this is going to be based on your per diem rates, your lodging rates, and things like that. So if it's for business purposes and not personal, you'll want to make sure that you're capturing all of that as well. So now let's say I'm returning, it was a short conference, I'm going to be returning, I returned on the 1st, and I left Paris at 5 p.m. and I arrived, just say the next day, at 9 a.m. in San Diego. Again, you're going to use the times that are accurate for you. And again, we're just doing that first stop, the time that you left the country until you arrive in San Diego. If you had business purposes in multiple countries and cities, then you would want to add those here. But if I'm just going to Paris, France, it's fine to just do the starting and end point. And I will save that here. And then since this was captured my full trip, there's nothing else I need to do. I'll select next at the bottom. And you can see there's my itinerary. I'll select next. Here's where it's going to ask if there was any meals provided. Again, this is a per diem. If breakfast or lunch were provided at a conference, then you need to account for that. So that way you're not getting the full per diem amount. So let's say the first day of the conference, and the second and the third, they offered me breakfast. Lunch was provided one day, and maybe dinner was provided this day. So I will make sure that those are accurate, and then I will hit create expenses. So step one is always getting that travel allowance in. Now that you have the travel allowance set up, what we're going to do is go ahead and add expenses. Again, you're going to create the entire picture of all the expenses you actually incurred for this international trip. So if that includes airfare, etc., meals, incidentals, hotel, lodging, whatever the case may be, you'll want to make sure that you capture all of those items. What we're going to focus on in this training is going to be meals and incidentals and lodging, since those seem to be unique to international, and we really want to highlight those. So first I'm going to select meals and incidentals. And it's the international one since this is international travel. Now, unfortunately, you will have to do each day. It doesn't allow us to put in for a range. So just be mindful of that. You're going to enter the date that you went. So I'm going to put the 26th was my first date, and I'm going to put that it was in Paris, France. Now it's automatically going to convert to the currency for that particular country. If we're doing the true per diem, it's going to be in dollars because we're just getting reimbursed for that amount. So you'll want to change that to dollars, and you'll select it. You can also type it in. That's probably quicker. The payment type will be out of pocket. We don't need the vendor name. Again, you're not using a receipt and having all your meals listed out here. It's more of that per diem effect. You'll see that this travel allowance is checked because we already created it. And now I'm going to look for the amount. So the way to find the amount is you're going to go to our travel website. You're going to go to training and resources. Then all the way at the very bottom, you're going to see international travel resources, and you're going to see international per diem rates. So we're going to select that. Then we're going to select foreign per diem rates by location. And then we're going to select the appropriate country and city. So for instance, I'm going to find France on here since that's what I have listed in my test. And I'm going to select go. Now I'm going to be looking at Paris. You also want to be mindful that there's not a season attached to yours. So for instance, Paris 157 is the meals and incidental that I can claim for meals and incidentals. So now that I have that number, I'm going to go back to Concur and enter 157. Now, depending on your travel allowance and when you get there, Concur is also going to prorate it. So let's say I arrived on this date in Paris in the evening. Well, I wasn't there for the full day, therefore I shouldn't get the full amount. And so I would hit save expense. And it's going to be working on saving that expense for me. And you'll see here, I've listed out-of-pocket meals and incidentals, Paris, France. I listed the full 157 because that's what I received from the US Department number. However, it automatically prorated it to the 117.75. So that's a nice feature of Concur is that it won't allow you to go over based on the prorated aspect. So we can do one of two things. We can click back in here and update it to that 117.75. And now we'll see that the requested amount is the full amount. So then you would just go through and continue to add expenses for each day. So now if we're looking at the 27th, I'm going to use that same 157 number. I'm going to save expense. And now we can see I did put in the meals on some of those days, so it's going to deduct it accordingly. So I would just select back in here and deduct it to the appropriate prorated amount. Again, if you didn't have meals at the conference you were going to, then you would claim that full per diem and it wouldn't just give you a portion of it. So here we can see that I'm starting to build out this expense report. And we would just continue on adding all those expenses. Again, this is international, so there's most likely going to be flights in there. So we would just continue to add all of those out. Just be mindful that anything over 75 is going to require that receipt. You will need to upload a PDF here. You would just go through, add the details specific to yours, and hit save expense and so on and so forth. The other one I want to touch on briefly is going to be hotel and lodging. Now for international, there is a per diem for hotel and lodging. So you may have seen that back here on this department website. For Paris, France, it is $363. And per policy, I can claim that full amount without having any receipts. So if you're choosing to do that, what you're going to do, again, you're going to put in your check-in date and your check-out date. And your check-out date, the transaction date, generally speaking, that's the day that you check out. It will ask for a vendor, so you will just need the name of the hotel. It may not be in there, so you can just type it. We don't need the hotel lodging address or room. We will need the city of purchase. And then the payment type, of course, is going to be out of pocket. I'm just going to refer back here again. It's that 363. So I'm going to put the 363 in here. And then in my, I'm going to check the travel allowance box. In my comments, I'm going to say that I am claiming the per diem for lodging. It still is going to require a receipt. And again, this is 363 for one night. So I would adjust accordingly since I have 4 nights. So let's times that. If I was just doing the one night, I would enter that. But since it is for 4 nights, I'm going to enter the full amount. And then what you would upload as a receipt image if you're claiming the per diem is actually going to be found in our policy. So let's click here real quick. And then we'll scroll all the way down. So here we have, if it's international, the daily meals and international and lodging, no receipts required. So you can just take a snippet of this and save it as a PDF, and that will suffice for your PDF here. You can probably work on getting one of those on the websites. I will put a note for that. So that's what you would enter here, and you would claim per diem for lodging. Per policy, no receipts required. Again, if you are doing it where you are putting an amount and you're using actuals, you would put the appropriate amount. You would select if it was in a different currency. So for instance, if this was in euros, I would select that to match my receipt, and I'd upload the receipt image. So those are kind of the 2 ways that you can do it for international. Then what we would do is go to itemizations here. So it's going to save our expense entry, and then it's going to ask that we itemize it. So itemization is just going to be as easy as creating an itemization. And then what we're going to do is select hotel and lodging. And now the nice feature is we can say it's the same every night, or we can say it's not the same. And depending on that, it would give us flexibility to itemize differently. So for instance, if your Saturday stay was more than your Thursday, Friday, you would be able to account for that. So here we can enter the 393, we'll save the itemization. It's 363. So definitely helps if you put the correct amount in there. But you can see that it will error out, and you want to make sure that this nets to 0. So you won't want it to be incorrect. Otherwise, I won't let you proceed. So you'll just go through and make sure that they're all the 363. Okay. So now that I see that they're all 363, I can proceed. I have a 0 remaining here. So now I can go ahead and save this expense. And then you'll see mine has that error because I don't have that PDF from the policy saved on there to submit as a receipt. But I would just go ahead and attach that and then proceed forward. Again, you're going to continue adding all the expenses, and we're not going to walk through that particular because that's kind of same as domestic. So these are the two areas where international varies. It's going to be first step, always getting that travel allowance. That is your first step. If you do not start there, these items will error out. So be really mindful of creating that travel allowance. And then once that travel allowance is done, it's a one-time thing. You can come in here and add the expenses. And then it should resolve your alerts up here. You'll see mine has a few more because this is for training purposes. You'll also see over here, we have everything that we've requested is correct. Again, if I were to have requested something that was outside of the US Department limits, it's only going to allow me to submit for the maximum. So just be mindful of that as well. And then again, you'll just continue to build this out. And when you're all done, you should have no alerts up here. You may have a few kind of just this warning right here. Reimbursements are limited to amounts by destination. And that's just ensuring that you checked it. Again, it is going to deduct accordingly, but you will probably see this listed there. Don't worry, that's just kind of a warning. It's not going to stop you. If you have any of these red items, that will stop you from submitting. But once everything looks appropriate and is accurate, you would submit report and it's going to route. So that is essentially creating an international expense report. I hope this was helpful. Thank you for your time.